You're on. You're on.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another segment of Straight Talk with Grover Thornton, a program designed to inspire, educate, and to inform you how our government works to impact our lives, be it national, state, or local. I'm here tonight with my co-host and producer, Pat Gunn. Tonight we're going to start our program. Last month, you remember when I spoke about the situation at Hyde Park when the situation happened about the march with Dr. King and some leaders into an area that was totally segregated, and they wanted to maintain it as a lily white residential area. However, since that time, the U.S. passed a housing law in which a person can live wherever they wish to live if they can afford it. But during this, getting my information for this week, I came upon this communique, which I had in my files, and the date in which that happened was 1966, exactly 1966. And what it says was that Dr. King was stoned as he led a march through Chicago South Side in America, in which he talked about equality and talked about democracy. And also I mentioned, the reason why I mentioned that because this situation that happened when I read a couple of weeks ago in Hyde Park, which was a terrible situation. I am definitely against violence. I was in the sit-ins, and I remember a group of us, we laid down in the street. Cars could have driven over us, but they didn't do it. Could have been some evil person, and that could have happened. So the point I'm trying to make, when you do these things, you never know what the results will be for payback. The reason why I say that, because when I thought about this situation that happened at the raid, when that man dressed like a woman and went up in a building and began shooting and killing innocent children, babies, that was awful. However, I remember reading in the scriptures about Prophet Hosea, when the Jewish people had been such a terrible people to deal with, one problem after another, against God's audiences. And what he said to them was this. He said these words, you sow the wind, but you reap the wild whirlwind. So they sowed the wind back there, and they don't look at what has happened to them. And like Jesus says, a man soweth, that's also he reap. So when you sow bad seeds, then look for terrible things to happen to you. It doesn't necessarily have to do one day. It can happen. And that is one of the situations that I wanted to bring to the attention of the public. That all of us, when we do these things, and not only that, God was sitting them down through generations to your children. And if you read God's words, you'll see those things. And this is supposed to be a Christian nation, but we far away from it. But we're that only in words, not deeds. I'm also happy to have with Pat Gunn to welcome her to work with me. Ms. Gunn, if you wish to make a statement on any of these areas that I'm speaking, then go right on and do so.
Well, I'm glad to be on board, Mr. Thornton. We've been trying this for a few weeks. Straight Talk with Grover Thornton is growing, and I'm just so excited to be with you in the studio this evening. So yes, I'm going to jump in when I can get an opportunity.
All right. Mm-hmm. Another thing I want to mention as we move forward, you remember what I kept saying from show after show, that only in America you have this mass killing, and listen to one of the commentators. He stated that when 3 or 4 people are killed, then that's what they call it, a mass murderer. And when I got a magazine here, and people trying to interest in this magazine, I have a Time magazine, but I haven't decided to purchase this particular one yet. I think it is As Things Is. And when I was reviewing the magazine, and I looked down to the bottom of the magazine, and it talked about Nigeria, and that's in Africa. Well, what happened in that country? A group of extreme people went in a Catholic church and murdered 50 people. 50 people were murdered in Nigeria by a group of extremists. So then I said, well, we're not the only one to have that in our background now. So we always have that in Nigeria. So I wanted to mention those a few things that I wanted to bring to your attention. Now I want to talk for a moment about some of our outstanding people when I talked about achievements of our race. You know, I always talk about our race, and I'd like for grandparents, like I told you in the article I read, to tell their children they need to listen to these things, not only from me, from other people, talking about things about our race. Now, one thing about the Jewish people and the Jewish children, when they get to a certain age, we in the Baptist church or the Catholic church, we have the baptism. They do some kind of system, the bar mitzvah, and when they become a member of the Jewish faith, as far as like in the church, but they know the history of their people. They know the history of the Jewish people, and that's what I try to do, is to talk about things where our young people could learn and listen and try to do things. I remember when I was in school, I imagine a lot of you do so also, that the teacher would give you assignments to write about a certain person. I don't know whether they do something they don't do in school now they need to be doing. Because one of the things that I find out with young people in the school, they can't even write a paragraph. They don't know where to put a comma. They don't know what an independent clause is. These things that we can help our children with by learning to listen and read about our people. Now, you take this young lady that I'm about to show you right now, Miss Fannie Lou Hable. This lady was in Mississippi, and during the 1968 convention, she believed in voting and believed in working for voting rights in the backwoods of Mississippi. And she went to the National Baptist Convention with a group, and they would not seat her. They would not seat her in the Credentials Committee. But she and her group raised so much sand that they had to seat her in the convention. The point is simply this with Miss Hammer. She died. She was a great civil rights person, but not an educated lady. But she was a lady educated in motherhood. That's what they used to always call that. And she knew that it was important to have civil rights. It was important to be able to vote in a democracy, which I could never understand how we could go around and say we have a democracy, and they were doing things to, like now, all these restricted laws that they have to keep you from voting. That Republican Party, that's some party. It's terrible. And she was one of the persons that led a group of people from Mississippi to be seated at the National Convention in 1968. And of course, she died from cancer, and she's always mentioned on television about her work with voting in this country. Another group I think young people need to know about is this gentleman right here. Baseball, Jackie Robinson. I was in the store one day, and it was in a public grocery store, and I would look at the magazine rack to see whether I want to purchase anything they have. And this book right here of Jackie Robinson was a great baseball player. He was the first African American in 1947 to play professional baseball. Now, we had a lot of Negro baseball teams, and they had their own leagues. They had the leagues. But Jackie Robinson was an outstanding student at UCLA, and it was a man by the name of Brash Rickey. Brash Rickey saw him and wanted to integrate the National Baseball League, with the American League and the National League. No African American was in it, which is terrible. They had players from other countries in it, particularly from down in South America and other places that where they played baseball, and they brought in these white men, but no black man in this country. And when they hired Jackie Robinson, I saw this book, and my son and I was in the store, and I said to my son, check that book and see what that book costs. And he said, well, $15. I said, well, I'll get it later. I'll talk about it on my show. So there was a white gentleman standing up there, and he said to me, well, I got to say one thing. He was an outstanding baseball player. He was still home. When the ball was going back to the pitcher, he would take off and run and slide and be safe at the home plate. And a lot of the catchers got very upset because they tagged him, and it was always too late. And the thing about it, and the white man said to me, we were talking, and I was in line behind him, and he said to my son, pass me that book. And that white gentleman bought this book for me because we were talking about Jackie Robinson, and he gave me this book. And another good friend of mine happened to be a white gentleman. He and I were talking about it, and he sent me this. He talked about Jackie Robinson, and he sent me this photo of Jackie Robinson, picture of him. And I saw him play here in Grayson Stadium, right down Victory Drive on Expedition game. I think it was against the Philadelphia Phillies, what it was. I believe that was the team they played against. I made a mistake of saying the Indians, but it was the Phillies. And I saw him playing, and he was the only black person on that field. But let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, he caught complete hell, Hell, double L, playing in the National Football League. I mean, baseball league. When he was sliding to second base, he drove the pitchers crazy because he owned enough first base, making them nervous. And then what they had in the rules of the game, a pitcher can what they call balk. He started to throw the ball, and something happened. He make the wrong footing, then that's a balk, and the man would go down to second base automatic. He kept him nervous, and he would steal the bases, and just outstanding. But you had some nasty people in the stand. They called him every word you could think of. Even one no Philadelphia manager, he brought a black cat to the game. This is your brother. Oh, they ridiculed that man. But the fact of the matter is he was outstanding. He hit home runs, he ran, and he was outstanding. And there were other great ball players, much better than him. But he had a black man by the name of Gibson. He was magnificent, better than Babe Ruth. But he never got into the league because of the color of his skin. This is awful when you think about it. It's terrible. And that's what happened to Jackie Robinson, was very outstanding in the National League. Another group I was trying to show you was, was this gentleman right here. This is the airplane that he flew. They flew. Should not only him. These were people we call the Tuskegee Airmen. It was a group of men that President Roosevelt, when NAACP and leaders of the black community during the war, approached President Roosevelt about these men training to take a part in the war. And someone mentioned about these men could learn how to fly planes. And of course, you know, the opposition, there were a lot of men, representatives and senators and all of that. Here's one of the men who flew these planes. There were about 30 of them, and their job was to protect the bombers. And the bombers were the planes that would carry the bombs to drop on the buildings, on the installations that the Germans had to produce war. And these men flew these planes and never lost one. Not one bomber was attacked by the Germans and destroyed. Of course, about 32 of them lost their lives. It was a terrible situation, but they were very outstanding. They thought black people could not fly a plane, to show you that we can do anything we get the opportunity to do if they give us the opportunity to do it. Color and brains has nothing to do with it. So I just thought I'd mention that, and I think people should learn about this. I guess many of you have never heard of the Tuskegee Airmen, the Tuskegee, Alabama, the school down there where they were training. And I thought I would show these pictures to talk about these people. And I wanted to talk about them tonight because of our experience that when we got the opportunity to produce, we can produce as a group and as a people. Now, we have so many things going into the nation today. Let's look at President Biden, for instance. I can never understand why he's getting these low ratings. But this week and last week, he achieved things that never have been achieved in the history of this country. One was the climate and the health bill. Now, what I cannot understand how these Republican people can vote for people who do not care for you. Every achievement that this nation has made that benefit the whole the citizens has been done by the Democrats. Now you take Social Security. That was not a program started by the Republicans. It was started by President Roosevelt. Then there was Medicare. That's not a program by the Republicans. Then there's the Voting Rights Act. Some of them might have voted for it, but it was initiated by President Johnson and the Democrats. Now you take, for instance, I believe I said it last month, but I'm so happy that now you take taxes. This new bill that just got signed by the president, the Inflation Bill Act. 55 countries last year, including Amazon, paid no taxes. No taxes at all. Can you imagine how much money they made? Now they got to at least pay 15% of their gross income to help fight for these programs that we have. And I can't understand why they keep giving President Johnson such low rating. And I guarantee you, I never heard whether there was a breakdown on the percentage when they say on their polling. And I guarantee you, most of them are Republicans. And you take the Abortion Act, and I think this, my position is this. My position is this. A woman has a right to control her own reproduction life. Not the state, not the government, but individually. We know what the Supreme Court did. Now, the only way we can get that overturned, if all these women and black folk had to always vote, because we had to go through hell to learn how to vote, because they never wanted us to vote even in the Democratic primary. We can only vote for president. But keep in mind now, they're running all over the world, being a hypocrisy, saying that we have a democracy. This country was not set up as a ruling class, a caste system. It was set up with every citizen's equal protection of the law. Even that mess Trump is doing, taking all the secrets of the nation. And you have the Presidential Act that every president is supposed to leave all his documents right in that office that would go to the National Archives. And he shipped them down to that place tomorrow wherever he lives. Now the Republicans came out and said, never this happened to any president. This is unprecedented. Well, this is unprecedented what he done. We never had a president in 240-something years doing the things that he did and has done. In my personal opinion, he ought to be criminalized and go to jail. That's where he belongs. All of them. Try to overturn the government. All of them. And talk about running for president. I don't understand American people. I don't understand that black man on TV I saw this morning, Tim Scott, talking about the same thing. So in other words, you don't care whether Trump have all these secret documents. Some of them says nobody can see it except the president and a few other people. Strict secrecy about the national security of this nation. How in the world can they go along with Mr. Trump with that? He got them all in his hand, like Adolf Hitler had millions of people during the German time of his administration. That's what has happened in this country. And nobody condemned him. Nobody condemns Trump. They came to the fist that he was wrong with all it. They don't care about all the secrets. Anybody can get a hold of them. He may get mad at the country, sell them to the Russians, give them to the Russians. That man is a psychopath. That's what he is. He's a psychopath and a cancer on this nation. He's a cancer. And you know what you try to do with a cancer. So I thought I would say that because that's my personal feeling about this country. And being a man that's been in the military. Now, if you have been in the military like Trump, never done everything to keep him going to the military by his feet, all with excuses. And the nation cannot exist like that. We better think about maintaining this democracy. And he got all these people, never condemn him. I never understand it. And how come Mr. Tim Scott, a black man, voted against a black woman getting on the Supreme Court after 240-something years, and 3 white people, Mitt Romney, Mr. Kawaza from Hawaii, and also Susan Collins from Maine, voted for that black woman to get on the Supreme Court, and the black man didn't vote for it. And those Negroes are turned right there in South Carolina and put him right back in the Senate, and he voted against the $1,400 rescue plan that Biden gave. So how does that care for you? What's wrong with the people of South Carolina? Why would he want to put a Republican man back in office, be he black, blue, or green? And he does nothing to benefit you, to make life better for you. Why would you put him in the Senate? But these women better get out and vote And I don't hear them saying that Trump put those three people in that court to overturn the Roe versus Wade. So anyway, I thought I mentioned those things that are very important to us as a people and as a race. Now we have a real special guest on our show tonight. I care about all my people, particularly women, and I think women deserve to do anything a man can do when it comes to work and receive the same amount of money that a man does get doing the same type of work. Women had to fight for the right to vote. Women could not always vote. And of course, I don't have to mention to you about black folk, but they were able to get a chance to vote in 1920 something, but there were years where they couldn't vote. Women are very smart and they can do the same type job. If a woman does the same job a man has, then she should get the same amount of money and the same benefits that he gets. So we have an outstanding lady, I think, on our guest here tonight, and that's City Councilwoman, Miss Kesha Carter Gibson. Bring her in. Can I see her?
No, she's not here yet, not till 8 o'clock.
I can't understand.
Not till 8 o'clock.
Oh, the 8 o'clock. Okay. She's supposed to be turning in at 8 o'clock a few minutes from now. So what we will talk about, another thing that's that we're concerned about is that is getting out and vote. People, we got to get out and vote. People lost their lives to vote. Not only black people, but white folk. During the march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama, a white minister was murdered. A white lady from Detroit was murdered, taking people to the poll booth and registering to vote by the Ku Klux Klan. So white people have lost their lives for black people to vote because they believe in a system where everybody have a right to participate and vote in this nation. And they've done everything, gerrymandering. Gerrymandering simply means they're bringing in other parts of the county to dilute the black vote. But they take an area where there's virtually no black vote, and they bring that area in to dilute the vote of the black minority people. That has happened over and over and over. So we need to get out and exercise our right to vote. And we need to vote this time in November like we have never voted before. It's essential that we get out and vote. Our lives depend on it, for our children. And all these wonderful things that come along with being able to cast your vote and to vote. And also you look at, they're trying to keep white children from knowing what went on during the segregated areas, but the critical race theory. I remember when they asked my phone, and the white gentleman was on the phone, and he said, "May I speak to Mr. Thornton?" I said, "This is he. What can I do for you?" And he said, "Well, you know, Mr. Thornton, there's so many things going on in this nation right now, and I'm deeply concerned about this critical race theory." I said, hold it right there. Just hold your seat. I said, you are against that because you do not want the white children to know the history of how bad you people treated black people. So you try to get the books out of school. This same man that sent me this picture of Jackie Robinson, he and I were talking, and he was telling me once that his mother was a school teacher, and a lot of new books came in, and they were gathering up all the old books from the schools, stacked them up, and he was under the impression that they were going to take them and throw them in the dumpster, burn them, whatever. And he asked his mother, she said, put these books over here. And he said, "Mother, what are we going to do? Are we going to throw these books away in the dumpster, burn them?" No, we're going to send them to the colored children. They get the new books. We get the books that they've drawn in, written in, marked in, and the white children get the new books. When we did not have a black person on the board of education, the pastor of my church at that time, Reverend Curtis Jackson, I was on the NACP board with Mr. Lloyd, all of that, and Mr. Jackson was over the education committee, and a group of us went down when we knew he had a meeting with the board at their meeting to be there to discuss put the black person on this board of education. And I remember very distinctly Dr. Jackson took his finger and threw at that white man at the other end of the table and said it was time to put a black person on this board of education. We have more black children in the public schools than white children, and yet we do not have any representation on this board of education. And soon, a black person was on that board was Mr. Perry's dead. He was the president of Copper State Bank. And of course, later on, Ms. Esther Garrison, who was the secretary for the NAACP when I was on the board, she became on that board, and also a school, as you know, is named after her. She served very wonderfully on the board of education. So these are some of the things that our people need to know, and they don't know. And one of the things we are lacking is people really telling out the story about our race to our children. And that's why when I read the article, I said that one of these segments that grandparents listen, tell your children. And we need to inspire our children. Go take them to the library to read. They need to learn how to read. That's one of the biggest problems that a lot of the black children have is to read, but you don't ever read if you just sit and watch the TV all day. I was shocked when I read about President Obama. His children didn't always sit there on TV on a certain time. They read, they went to the library, they did everything that would enhance them. And that's what we need to do with our children. We need to inspire them. And when you look at other people, like the young lady who's going to be on the show tonight, she's a city alderman. And think of the fact that she had to see somebody that inspired her to want to do that. She just didn't arbitrarily say, I'm going to run. Somebody had to inspire Ms. Gibson to want to do that. And this is what we need to do. Because you never know what child is watching you to emulate you on the good things and to achieve. I think my next segment next month, I'm going to name, it's going to be the Women's Month for the achievements. And I'm going to name outstanding women, national, local also. Because if they achieve to do something, then it takes courage, it takes the desire to want to be successful, it takes the ability to want to improve themselves and improve our people. That's what we got to do. We got to keep improving our people. Now, this is not no religious program, but I got to say that when I was coming up in Sunday school, there was always 25, 30, or 40 children in Sunday school. But these parents today don't send their children to Sunday school. They don't know anything about Christ. All they know when Christmas comes, they get us something for Christmas. That's about the size of it. They need to go to Sunday school. We need to wake up with our children. We can't become lax in our ability as a people. We got to inspire our young people for the better things. I went to a program this morning for the late Dr. J.D. Marsh. A young man grew up on my street. On the street I live on. I ain't got no street. The street that I lived on, 34th Street. And he became a doctor. And of course, he died from COVID. And he practiced first in Plains, Georgia. And President Carter was one of his patients. Former President Carter was one of his patients. And of course, he had been on a move to Americus, Georgia. And of course, he was having an old gentleman to his car. And he caught that virus, COVID. And they sent him back to Chatham County here. I think it was Memorial Hospital. And he was in a respirator about 3 months. And he passed. And a lot of people, we honored him today. And I spoke about him being, my sister used to put diapers on him across the street. And I never knew that he wanted to be a doctor. And he was inspired to do so by watching other doctors. That's what I'm trying to say. That our children can be what they want to be. Color of the skin has nothing to do with the ability to be successful and to achieve. So let us get down on our children. Let them study hard. Like I told my grandson, he plays basketball on one of the teams in the school. I said, come here, son. I'd say, no, I don't care how much that man told me that you got a lot of moves in basketball. I see him here in the yard on the basketball, dribbling the way he moves and all that. I said, but you got to have something upstairs. These colleges are not going to bring you into no college where the man go out to see you and see you perform. And then when it comes to the books, you out of bounds. You got to achieve and study. And that's what we got to inspire our people. It's about 8 now. It's about time to bring her in. I'm hoping to bring in Mrs. Gibson. Are we ready for Mrs. Gibson? So let us, while we're waiting to find out what the problem is, we're going to bring her in. Because I'm very anxious to talk with her. Oh, she's not here yet. Aren't they going? What about the link going to her? So while we were waiting on her, I'm trying to think of something that we can discuss, and that is what I would like to talk about now is a statement that I didn't want to get into this subject about Miss Griner. I really didn't want to get into this subject because I have my own opinion about that. But I can say this: they should turn her, bring her back home. But let me tell you this: I'm just like I named my show. It's straight talk. I hate drugs. I hate my own two boys were hooked up with that stuff one time. Thank God because the training they got to change their lives around years ago. I hate drugs. Think about how many people, young people, have lost their lives with drugs. Think how many senior citizens have been preyed on by drugs. I hate the word drugs when it comes to drugs that are given to you by a doctor. I use drugs, the one that given me by a doctor. What they all mention too about these drugs. Think about this while we're waiting on this lady. You take this drug that is so expensive, $300 it costs, and it was developed over 100 years ago. You know what drug I'm talking about? Very, very, very expensive drug. And they're taking advantage of people. It's wrong. And I'm so glad they passed this bill. They're going to allow the Medicaid group of officials to negotiate with all of these pharmaceutical companies. Now, I'm having trouble with my eyes, and I went last week and got a drug because I got the United Healthcare. I had to pay $74 and something cents for it. So I asked the pharmacist. I had to get special permission to get another because it's hard to put that stuff in your eye and you waste it. And I did get that. And I said, now what would it cost me to get this drug if I was not a member of this unit with the United Healthcare? The lady said, the pharmacist lady said, $247. A little old bit of medicine, about as long as your finger. Thank God now they're going to be able to negotiate with these people for these drugs, that they won't be so expensive. You could go over to Canada and buy the same drugs at a cheaper price. And I'm just concerned about these drugs, and our poor people cannot afford them. They got to decide whether they eat or whether they get their medicine. We should not be in that position. We have so many people are homeless in this nation. There's a lady, I don't know her name, but she sit around public grocery store just about every day if it's not raining or freezing weather or too hot. And every time we go to the store, I give her money every time I pass by. Sometimes it's $1, sometimes it's $2, sometimes it's $5. All depends what I got in my pocket to give. But I look at it, I said, this is awful. In the greatest country in the world. You see whites as well as black people with these signs holding up, I'm homeless. Now, I don't know that some of them, if they're fooling them to people, that's them. They'll pay the price for it. But I look at this old lady and I mentioned to her, I said, well, you out here on the south side, we don't have no shelters over here. She said, well, I do come over here because people will be more attentive to give me a helping hand. And she said she was living in a motel. I said, how can you afford to live in a motel? She said, so far I try to raise $80-something every day. And I came by there one day, the poor lady was hot, and she was in a chair. My son and I were sitting in the car. There were 2 or 3 cars ahead of me because they didn't stop to give her anything. And I stopped. And she was sitting in the chair, and the chair was leaning against a building, sleeping. But holding that sign, and her sign says, anything is a blessing. And why would we have all this poverty in this country? Why we have also many people in the street asking for money? Now, I grant you some of these people may be lazy. Because I know I saw them in Montgomery Crossway one time. this black guy was sitting in this chair, and this white girl was holding the sign. Now, I didn't give them people a dime because it didn't look like they were really in need. Sometimes they have these scams, and this is what happens. So we will have to be very, very careful on that. But when you give to help the needy, God blesses you. He says that in the Word. Whoever lends to the poor, lend to the Lord, and the Lord will reward him, is what the book of Proverbs says. So we still have a long way to go in this country. Excuse me 1 second. What's the problem? So I don't know why we have not gotten Ms. Gibson on yet. I just don't know why. So I'm trying to think of things that would inspire us as I talk. And we still have a lot of power in this country. We got poverty in Savannah. Families living on weekly rates in hotels and somewhere to get the money to pay. And the poor people. I don't understand it. We keep having poverty, but you never see a decrease. You're going to ask, that's one of the questions I was going to ask Ms. Gibson today. I don't know what has happened to the connection, but I'll go ask her tonight. What seemed to be the problem? There's poverty on the increase in this country. Now, another thing I want to mention, I want people to understand. The Bible says it gets understanding. And if you don't understand something, then you should ask somebody who knows. Now, for instance, the price of gas is coming down. But they're blaming Mr. Biden for gas. Mr. Biden doesn't run no gas. He had no oil fineries. The Mobil and Exxon are all companies, most biggest companies in the world on refining. They should do more drilling. They don't want to do more drilling. Now, the president did go into what we call the strategic oil reserve. That is for, as I said before, several meetings, talking to you. That is for in case the country is in a war, because no machinery, no trucks, no cars, no generators for electricity, nothing can run without oil. So you can't blame Mr. Biden for it all. This is a global problem why gas was high. Mr. Putin was selling gas to other countries that sells them over the world. He would say, you cannot get this oil unless you buy them with rubies. So that means to get his rubies, not their dollar, their money is called rubies, you'd have to purchase stuff from them. There's so much I like to talk about people as we go on about economics and how this system works. How do we get Social Security increase? Next time I will explain that to you. And I guarantee you right now, a dollar against a nickel, that Herschel Walker cannot even tell me anything about how you get that CPI. But I'll discuss all that the next time. Are you saying Ms. Gibson is here? Ms. Gibson, how are you this evening?
I'm fine. I'm in a remote area, but I'm happy to be with you tonight.
Well, I'm so happy to have you on the show. You know, I met you a few years ago. Remember my partner, and fraternity brother, Mr. John Willard, we was having lunch in that restaurant, and someone introduced you to us. You remember? That when you first started running for office.
Yes,
and
sir.
I met you. So I'm very happy to have you on this program tonight. And I understand you're running for mayor, and I'm just pleased that you're here tonight so the citizens could hear some things that you want to tell us about. First question.
I want to remind you that I actually met you before that time. I don't know if you remember. It was during the time I was the executive director of the Interfaith Hospitality Network, now known as Family Promise. And we were looking.
Oh, okay then. Okay. Well, so
we were looking for a place to rent for the shelter, and we connected with you about some property that you had.
No, ma'am. That was my late brother, my brother Earl, who was in the real estate business for 30-something years.
Oh, my gosh.
He and I look so much alike. People still associate me with my brother.
Y'all look like twins.
No, we're not twins. No, he died going on 2 years now. He was 92 years old.
Well,
He was like the daddy of the family, of the sisters and brothers.
wow.
I really miss him. But anyhow, I'm glad to meet you, and I met you in the restaurant when you first announced you were running for office.
Right.
So,
Well, and you know what? I always thought you were your brother. So there you go.
yeah, thank you very much for that. And I'm so happy you came. I was about to be a little disappointed, and I kept talking about issues that concern our people because I'm an 88-year-old man now. The Lord bless me. In November, I'll be 89. So I thank God for that. And I've been always giving service to the community since I've been 17 years old. I had the opportunity to meet Martin Luther King Jr., and opportunity to meet Miss Constance Morley, who's the first black woman federal judge, and of course, a great lawyer, Thurgood Marshall. I had, when I was president of the Youth Council NAACP, I had a chance to meet him. So I was inspired, and I like for young people to see you can achieve, like I said, next month, I'm going to talk about all these women that I know and met, local and all, who doing a great job. So I'm happy to have you, and I know you're running for mayor. Now let's get down to business. The question I want to ask you, Ms. Gibson, is tell the community why you decided to run for mayor. You were already a councilman. Tell us why you were to get our votes. Tell us why you want to run for mayor.
Savannah has been living a nightmare, and it's now time for a mayor who cares. It's time for a mayor who cares about the community, who cares about more than his or her own personal gain, his or her own career. Right now, we're living in a time in our community where people who were born here, raised here, grew up here, graduated and went to school here, can no longer afford to live here. The demography of the city of Savannah is changing so much so that we will not know the city that we know to be the same in 2 to 4 years if something does not change. My goal is to represent all of Savannah, to care for our communities, protect our sacred land like the Weeping Time, protect the culture of our community. We need someone who will tackle core issues like crime and poverty and homelessness from a real perspective and not a political perspective. Everything Savannah needs to be successful, everything that Savannah needs to be a model community for the whole community is in the house. We have everything we need. In 2019, the electorate spoke loud and clear. And the mandate was that we no longer would tolerate investment in things brick and mortar and put first developers and contractors. But the electorate wanted representatives who would invest in flesh and blood, who would invest in community. And in short order, this council came in after breaking historic voting records. The majority of this council beat out big business and big campaign contributions, commercials, and billboards. The electorate sent a group of activists and advocates to City Hall. But in short order, with that spirit of altruism, unfortunately, many of the individuals were met with establishment politics that they could not resist. The payouts under the table, over the table, the fine dining, the Kreitz and BMW accounts, the extensions of additions on their homes. And there's a lot that people just were not able to resist. And as a result, what we have now experienced is a lot of forced displacement from Clearview, from our public housing, Savannah cottages, Heritage Apartments, Abercorn Terrace, you name it, around the city, we are experiencing a tremendous amount of forced displacement. There used to be a time when individuals would experience a rental increase annually of $50 to $75, maybe $100 per year. Right now, Individuals are experiencing rental increases between $300 to $500 at one time, uh, making it difficult and impossible for them to maintain their places to stay. The city of Savannah, the county of Chatham, received millions of dollars via ARPA and the CARES Act. Millions of dollars have been pumped into local nonprofit organizations. And despite the infusement of those dollars to these organizations, we still have families with children living in cars, living in hotels, and living in overcrowded conditions in their homes. This council, this council has done nothing to move the needle to control that. But what we have done is we have continuously approved developer petitions for special use, developer petitions for housing in various areas from the Highlands to Georgetown, without little economic drivers, without little parameters whereby we are protecting our communities. Right now, from the corridors of Waters Avenue back to Habersham Street, and from 37th Street back to Anderson, the whole complexion of that community has changed. People who are now living in Savannah, you can't name, in naming 5 people who you know right now, 3 of them live in Pooler, Port Wentworth, Garden City, Effingham, Guyton, out of Savannah, because they cannot afford to live here. And so a totality of the core of where we are as a community in terms of what we can do as mayor. First, we can uphold the charter of the city of Savannah, and that is to give every older person their rightful place in government, whereby they are carrying the voice of the people. What I have been doing and what I intend to do is to continue to encourage citizens to take their rightful place in local government. For far too long, we have been led by politicians who make people believe that they are the servants and the politicians are the leaders. If and only when our citizens mobilize and form a collective voice and take up an issue, that's the only time have seen change. Over the last couple of months, we have seen property taxes increased. We have seen the passage of items like incorporating a U.S. attorney to prosecute our local state cases. We've seen so many injustices in this community that the NAACP, our activist organizations, our advocates, they should have lent a voice to these issues. But unfortunately, you have 3 women on council, myself, Alderwoman Blakely, and Alderwoman Lanier, who are holding up the banner and stand on the wall. But we are human. We are human, and we cannot do it all. And no longer can we, this is my appeal to the public, no longer can we afford to live by people saying they didn't know, they didn't understand, they didn't hear about it, or they didn't know what to do. If you love Savannah, if you want to stay in Savannah and live in Savannah in harmony, it is time for our citizenry to mobilize and engage in our local government. We are one vote and one voice. The mayor has maneuvered and essentially backdoored his way into changing the charter to a strong mayor form of government, which essentially has iced those who are progressive and who care about community out of the legislative process, thereby precluding us from being able to present or to enact legislation that could be considered for passage. And so as a result, here we are today. Nothing has changed between now and the last administration except for crime is higher, homelessness is higher, poverty is higher, we have more forced displacement, and the morale within our local government among all departments is lower than it ever has been. We need a leader who will get out of the way, who will not be led by politics, but will get the right people on the right bus in the right seats and do the right thing. There is an entrenched culture within this city that's owned by the establishment. There are about 3 or 4 families who pull the strings of what happens in our local government. We need someone who is courageous enough, who is brave enough, and who is not afraid to stand up to that establishment and say, we are here for the people, and I do not want what you have. I do not need what you have. We are here solely for the citizens of Savannah. No more gaslighting. No more smoke screens. And if we consider this, Mr. Thornton, if you look at our local government over the last 12 to 20 years, if I were to ask you and your listeners, which of the 6 districts that we have in Savannah, 1 through 6, which are the most underserved, most impoverished, high in crime, and the greatest lack, which districts would you say those are?
Oh, you asked me the question.
Yes.
Well, I know I live in the 6th district, and that's pretty well. The question now, I mean, as I listen to you, I am very disturbed, and you opened the door. I didn't open it, and that is this. When you said there were the 3 of you, when you named yourself and 2 other ladies, well, what the other people doing?
Well, I want to say this will help sum it up, right? Okay, so of all of the districts that we have in Savannah, there are 2 that fit the category that I just laid out, and that's the 1st and the 5th district, right? The 1st district and the 5th district are the districts with the highest rates of crime, poverty, the highest, that those are the 2 districts that are most underrepresented. And so of the 1st and the 5th district, when you look at our council, who historically have represented those districts? And the answer to that is Van Johnson and Estella Shabazz. And so the point that I want to make, Mr. Thornton, in terms of who on council is doing what, I want people to understand that this is not an issue about race. This is an issue about classism, elitism, and selfishness, right?
Yes,
if you look at the districts that are the most underserved, the districts that are highest in poverty and crime, the districts where there's least amount of support, you go to the 5th district, the 1st district, we don't see many sidewalks, we don't see much traffic calming, we see a lot of blight, we see a lot of just lack and need, right? Yes. Well, the individuals on our council who have historically represented those districts are Van Johnson and Estella Shabazz. And so what I want to say to the citizens today is we can no longer afford to vote for people who look like us when they are not going to represent us. And when you are seeing that people are not serving the way they campaign, we can't afford to wait till another election to vote them out. I am not so excited about becoming the mayor of Savannah, or I don't want to become the mayor of Savannah so bad that we miss an opportunity to get it right now. I want it to be right on Van Johnson's watch. I want the city of Savannah to know that Van Johnson has been the greatest cancer to the city of Savannah. But I also want you to know that time is not up. We do not have to wait until 2023 to get it right. Because you know why? We just may lose more lives. We just may have more forced displacement. We just may have more missed opportunity for businesses. That's not fair to wait another 2 to 3 years for us to get it right. So what we should do is, right now, we need citizens to mobilize, engage, and take their rightful place in government. Participate in the process. Come to City Hall. Come to the meetings. Write us via email, call your district older persons, challenge them, hold them to the carpet. We are one voice and one vote. They have maneuvered to get us out of the legislative process, but when citizens mobilize, when they engage, they can make this right. We still have major issues with the arena. We have major issues with the fairgrounds project. We are trying to save the weeping time. We are experiencing mass numbers of individuals being forced out of Savannah. We need citizens to help us. For 2 years straight, the city of Savannah has voted to increase taxes. And this time, under the guise of giving police officers a raise and increasing the salary of incoming police officers and firefighters. It's gaslighting. You know why, Mr. Thornton? Because for two and a half years, we have been down more than 100 police officers. More than 100 police officers. Those are positions that were budgeted for. Those are salaries that we did not expend. So when you multiply 2.5 years times the number of police officers we should have had, which let's just take the low number, 100, it's actually more than 100. We're talking an extra $4 to $5 million conservatively that we still have, but we raise property taxes by gaslighting people and making them believe that we needed to give that raise or increase those salaries when that was never, ever the case. And so we need people to pay attention. We need you to pay attention. And so as your next mayor, what we will do is we will give voice to the people. We want to make the Gold Dome Savannah's home. We want to listen more than we demand and command. We want to listen to the needs of the people, but we also want to see the opportunities. Right now, we're dealing with some giants who have been taking off for far too long. The Savannah College of Art and Design owns more than 178 properties in the city of Savannah, of which are among the most expensive properties. They don't pay a dime in property taxes, and they do not reinvest back in Savannah. The Georgia Ports of Authority are reporting record rates of revenue and profit. Where is the profit sharing? The giants can no longer take all when it's built on the backs of the people who are of the most impoverished. We cannot continue to have a one-sided community. We do not want to be punitive in our appeals. We do not want to put forth lofty mandates. But what we do want to do, we want to come to a table of equity where we can reason. I don't want to take from people, but what we want to do is we want to ask the question, what is it that you think? What role do you feel you play when you are reporting for the first time in the history of Savannah College of Art and Design, over 3,000 students entering their university this year? What does that mean to our police department? What does that mean to our fire service? And what investment should you make, Scat? You tell us, right? You tell us. But we can't keep having dinners with you. We can't keep giving you our trade secrets. The mayor hijacked the fairground project's idea and gave it to SCAD, leaving that project in shambles because they played politics with the lives of the residents of the 5th District. These are the truths. And it's so much more. There is so much more, from our hiring practices, the unethical behaviors within the corridors of City Hall. It's so much more. And what we want to do is we want to engage in a higher level of professionalism. We want to make the city of Savannah the premier place to work, so that when workers are happy, they are delivering services in a manner which is harmonious to our citizens. Right now, we're having huge issues with our revenue department. The city of Savannah just signed off on a $5 million contractual agreement to make our meter reading process electronic. We purchased another product like that last year, but here we are again with citizens experiencing getting water bills that are 2 and 3 times more than the previous year or the previous month. The bills are not being read because they are being based on estimates, projected on estimates. And so here we are. So it's a lot. It's a lot. I don't want to be a negative Nelly, but what we do want to do is just make it plain to our citizens where we are.
Ms. Gibson, I'm so glad. Now, what I hate that you were giving us so much information, and there were several questions I need to ask, but our time is not up. I'm gonna have you to come back here next month because there's some questions that you kept saying some things, and I was making some notes, some questions I was gonna ask. Mr. Hall doesn't mind me running over a minute or two, but I can't go too much longer. And you said a lot of things in your presentation that the people need to know. You know, when I'm saying when you got the council with 7 or 8 people and only 3 people trying to move the thing forward, what the heck is the other 5 are doing? Why can't there be some unity? You opened the door, so you told us so many things that are not happening. I know for a fact, young lady was living in Pooler, and she came home and got $1,100. She was paying $1,000 a month, and it went up to $1,200. I mean, you can't put a cap on it. These are things that I need to ask you about. I need to ask you about the poverty rate. You said some other things about people living here, there, and yonder. And what are the people doing? You're wasting money buying property, but it should be invested to the people. And you said about the police officers, a shortage in the police officers. Then you get the people raised, a shortage in the police officers. No wonder a lot of crime is good if we've got no police moving around in the streets. So those are things that I got to have you back. I need to ask you about the infrastructure bill. These streets are raggedy, messed up. But I got to have you back. So that
so we can talk about the millage rate. We can talk about T-Splosh the next time. We can talk about crime. And you know what, Mr. Thornton, what I want to talk about first when I come back is the fact that we are engaging in a contractual agreement with a search firm for our police chief when the majority of council thinks that everything we need is in the house. Why are we continuing to go outside of Savannah for personnel for the top law enforcement job of our city?
That's always been a problem. When you got people right inside can do the job.
Yes, well, and guess what, Mr. Thornton? Guess what? I don't want to jinx it at all, and I bless God for it. But guess what? Ever since we have had new change in leadership, we have not had another homicide. So there's a lot to be said about people who came up through the ranks of the city of Savannah or people who are from the city of Savannah who are now leading that department. I think we should leave it just as it is. We should save that $100,000 or whatever it is that we're investing in a police chief or a national search. I think it's a colossal slap in the face to our police department and to our personnel because they did not give the city manager and the mayor did not give consideration to asking the police officers, what is it that you want? And how is it that the police department and the officers are supposed to participate in a survey to replace themselves?
Well, all right, ma'am. I'm going to have to leave it there. I'm past my time, and I'm so sorry that you were late getting on because we lost a lot of valuable time listening to you. So I'm going to have you back because there are some questions I want to follow up on things that you've said. And I want the public to know. I want the public to listen to me really well before I cut off here tonight. If you have a question that you want to me to ask Ms. Gibson, then you call this number. Ms. Pat, give us the number. To call the number that you can call with the question, and when Ms. Gibson get back on, then I will ask her to answer your question. So again, ma'am, I want to thank you for coming on. And you can call me at my home, 925-1034. I don't have the other number. Ms. Pat doesn't have it, but you can call me there and leave a message that you want to respond to ask me to ask Ms. Gibson a certain question, and you watch next month and you see it. So thank you very much for coming on. And we hate you got late because you were really informing me because there are a lot of questions I want to ask you about. like the infrastructure bill. Where is that going to take out? Y'all get the money for that yet? But we're going to talk about that the next time, ma'am. And again, thank you very much for coming on. And it was a joy to listen to you.
Yes, sir.
And I want to thank everybody for listening tonight. And I hope that we'll be able to get you on right on time next time. I got to have you come back. I'm going to put you on for next month because you said a lot of things I think that affects us. And thank you very much for showing up tonight.
Yes, sir. Well, you have a good night. And I want to say finally, Mr. Gordon, it's not about my being from air, but it's about us.
Like this. Like this. Like this. Like this. Like this. Like this.